My name is Teresa Larson, and I'm talking with Dr. Burt Drexler, who's a longtime resident of Ames and has contributed in many ways to our town, most notably through Iowa State University Theater, and a long career as a professor here and as theater producer and director. Do I have your permission to talk to you on the video camera today?
Yes.
Okay. We are in your home here in Ames, Iowa, here the end of September 2010, but I want to flash back and first have you tell me the date you were born and where.
Well, I was born December 27, 1925 in Brooklyn, New York, at Long Island College Hospital, just south of Atlantic Avenue, I guess.
We'll go forward a little bit then in your life to when you went off to college. Where did you go to college?
Went to college at Johns Hopkins University for the wrong reasons.
And you want to tell me about what the wrong reasons were?
Well, I went as a pre-med. My folks wanted me to be a physician naturally. My father was a dentist. And since I wasn't interested in dentistry, it's logical that I should be a physician. So I went to Hopkins and was there for a year or so before I went into the service. And in the service I was hospital corpsman, became an operating room technician. And as an operating room technician, I decided it was great fun to anticipate which instruments the doctor would need next. But the idea of using those instruments on somebody didn't always appeal to me. So when I got back to college and I flunked organic chemistry, I changed my major to writing, speech, and drama at Johns Hopkins. The department which vanished for a while except for the writing part, but now they have a theater program again. So anyway, I graduated in 1949, I guess. Well, you want my career?
No, I will just say that I wondered where the drama instinct might have come from. Did your family go to shows in New York?
Oh, yes. I mean, the thing I remember most is they were very fond of going to the theater and they'd take me. And usually, my dad didn't work on Saturdays, so we would drive to New York, which is what we called Manhattan from Brooklyn, and easily find a parking space in those days, have a very good lunch, sometimes at a restaurant which is now gone called The Lobster, and then took in a matinee. And we did that quite a number of times, but I imagine it happened more frequently than it actually did. But I became very interested in theater, and then eventually, at a certain age, I decided I'd go to the theater on my own. I bought my first ticket. And for my first ticket, I went to see Charlie's Aunt with Jose Ferrer and paid 55 cents to sit in the second balcony. Second balconies no longer exist. They're called the balcony now, and the first balcony is called the Mezzanine.
And now that 55-cent ticket would be pretty
Be
pricey.
about $17 to $20
Yes.
to sit in the balcony now.
So you are in the program at Johns Hopkins, writing theater, drama. Were you in a play?
Yes. I was in Thurber's The Male Animal, and I played a minor role.
And then did you direct some plays then as a college student as well?
Yes, and my senior year I directed The Front Page by Hector MacArthur, and that was a lot of fun. And also I co-directed a play called Ladies in Retirement with another theater student. We co-directed, but this, the front page I directed on my own.
Did you have any summer theater experience?
Yes, I got the idea of trying to enhance my theater credentials by volunteering to work at the Provincetown Playhouse in Greenwich Village. And I did that 1 year with an undistinguished company. The next year I went back to the same theater, new company, but this company was a little more distinguished and had some people who became important in theater. And the third year I went back almost by design because I was experienced in working in the light booth. So, and somebody knew about this, so they decided I could work with this third company, which was a rather important one, and worked up in the light booth until it came time to go to school, and by that time, I don't know, I forget exactly what years, but working off-Broadway helped me get into graduate school and on an assistantship, technical assistantship.
When you say that the third year was a fairly important company, was it because the actors who were there, or?
Because it was a bunch of Yale people, and not all of them, only one of them, Theron Musser, who was the technical director, became a very important lighting designer on Broadway. But the previous company had Gene Sachs, who was an actor in the company but later became an important director, Harry Gardino, who became a rather important actor. But at the time I thought him as somebody who was probably the youngest member of the company, and I thought of all the people in the company, he was the one least likely to succeed. And he actually had a rather, not a quite starring career, but a very important career on Broadway. And Gene Sachs and Harry Gardino, there was a third person who was a playwright who, I forget his name now.
So I take it that at some point you decided that you wanted to go on for graduate work rather than to Broadway. There must have been some point where you said...
Oh yeah, I decided, as soon as I transferred from pre-med to writing speech and drama, the idea was that I would ultimately teach in technical theater on the university level, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily it was technical theater.
So you started working on your master's in what university then?
University of Minnesota. I had a technical assistantship. So I was working backstage, designing sets for the little theater, and occasionally acting. The only role I can remember acting was having a small role in Peter Pan, and also helped to fly Wendy.
Now, that is a critical role in the technical aspects of the world. So from the University of Minnesota, we're not to Iowa State yet. Did you have another
Oh
intro?
yeah, I decided when I got my degree at University of Minnesota, I decided I had to have some teaching experience. So I applied for an assistantship at Purdue, where I would where I would design a couple of plays, and also teach students in ag and engineering, which I did for a year, but it gave me the teaching experience.
And what were your credentials in the engineering part?
Well, I was just teaching those students, no credentials, just that it was an ag and engineering school like Iowa State was.
Oh, but you were teaching them English and speech.
I was teaching them speech.
Okay,
I was teaching them public
Yes.
speaking.
Public speaking. Okay, now I'm with you.
Yeah, public speaking. So, and I was also designing. I designed a couple of plays, The Glass Menagerie and Boy Meets Girl, that at Purdue, had a lovely year. And then, knowing there was no job at Purdue, I applied to 15 schools, one of them west of the Mississippi. And ultimately, I got replies from 2 schools, Iowa State College and Lehigh. So I thought I would drive out to Iowa State from Purdue, interview for the job there, and on my way home I stopped at Lehigh. But they did things differently in those days. Fred Lorch, the head of the Department of English and Speech, or English, I forget what it was at the time, offered me the job and gave me 2 hours to make up my mind.
That is unusual.
Well, it wasn't for 1952. And because, you see, I had all this technical experience, I'd be teaching that kind of student at Iowa State. And somebody at Purdue recommended particularly that I apply to Iowa State, so I did.
So you have 2 hours, and what are the things that are going through your head?
Well, there was a former graduate of Johns Hopkins who was my age, but hadn't been in the service, so he was now an assistant professor of statistics. So I went over and chatted with him and decided I'd try it for a couple of years and canceled out on Lehigh.
And what a great career path that opened up for you.
Well, I think so. On top of the thing, I really liked what was the little theater at the time, which had a decor of all the playwrights and things around inside.
Are we talking about Frederica Shattuck Theater?
Well, it was a theater workshop in those days, but we're talking about what became Frederica Shattuck Theater. And that charmed me, and besides I met Frank Brant, and I liked him very much, so this helped me decide to try it for a couple of days. On top of that, Frank decided he wanted to give up teaching for the summer and drive to New York with me and work in theater with I forget what group. And evidently it could be arranged that his wife would teach the course, who was accredited. She would teach the courses he was going to teach, and he drove east with me. And we had a wonderful time, and I got to know him very well.
What? I don't
And
think
then
that
there's a postscript to that.
Okay.
We took him up to join this company, and I forget what group it was, but it was a sort of an important group. He evidently stayed for 2 days, heard people plotting to haze him and stuff like that, and after 2 days he left, but I didn't find out about that part till I got back to Ames.
Well, Frank Brant had a distinguished career here too,
Yeah.
and was an interesting.
No, we
person.
became very good friends. I mean, well, I took him to see a play in New York and stuff like that, and on his way up to the trip, so I got to know Frank very well, which helped.
Were you colleagues, or was he much more experienced than you at that time?
Oh yeah, as a director, yeah.
Yes.
And he was not quite director of theater, or may have been director of theater at the time. But I think he was just about to become, not head of the department or anything like that, but Joe North had been director of theater, and he got more interested in television, so Frank, I think, took over the theater part.
So this is about 52.
52.
52 that you're here. Tell me about the kind of courses then that you started teaching at that time.
Just the basic public speaking course, and that was it.
And then augmenting it, then you were the technical
No,
person.
I also direct.
And you also directed.
Yeah, one reason Fred Lorch decided to hire me, he was sick and tired of hiring directors who couldn't build a set. So I qualified, and I had limited directing experience. Anybody could direct, Fred Lorch felt, But not everybody could build sets, and I had excellent technical experience.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one reason I guess I got offered the job. And I was coming from Purdue, where I've been teaching speech and building
Mm-hmm.
2 plays and designing 2 plays.
Now, at what point did Iowa State have this really interesting play selection class that was taught off campus?
Well, that was Frederica Shattuck's course. And I thought it was delightful, and just about when Frederica Shattuck decided to retire, I was able to take over the course.
And where was it taught?
At various sorority houses. Once a night, maybe a Wednesday night or something like that, and we'd meet for about 3 hours.
And anybody was welcome to come from the university, but
Yeah.
it just happened to be at a sorority house.
Yeah, it was The problem was that the ultimate head of speech at the time didn't think this was proper education. So at the first opportunity, I guess when I went off to work on my PhD,
Mm-hmm.
he decreed that this course would be taught in regular classrooms, and the course evaporated.
I think, do you know why Frederica Shattuck decided to have it off campus? Is there a little history behind that?
I don't know why. She just did, and that's the way she was teaching the course, and because she was such a prominent person, she could do what she wanted, in spite of Fred Lorge.
I do think that's interesting, to have that kind of cozy residential atmosphere, and I'm sure it brought out very good discussion. Did you find that?
I thought it was very educational, very good, and I wish I could have continued it, but Bob Underhill felt if it wasn't in the classroom, it wasn't proper education. And he was wrong, particularly these days.
Mm-hmm.
That type of course would still fly these days, I think, but...
I think you're right. I think people are looking for alternative places and
Yeah.
actually things out in the community to kind of
Yeah.
pull things together.
But I really enjoy teaching it, and had a lot of fun with it.
When you've been involved with teaching in the technical theater aspects, you've probably seen a lot of changes. First of all, we'll just talk about theater, the technical part of it. What kinds of things changed about the technical part that in your long career at Iowa State? Because I'm going to say for the record that the last show that you directed at Iowa State was 1991. Now, of course, you were in retirement, so I don't mean that you were...
Well, I was about to retire.
About to retire, yes. So, almost a 40-year career at Iowa State then. So, in that 40 years, what changed in the technical aspects of theater?
I don't know. I think more has changed since I stopped being in technical theater. Things have become much more sophisticated, and things, machines to light plays and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
that I know nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
And
Let's go back to Curtis Hall. I think you produced and did shows.
oh, I love to direct in Curtis Hall.
Tell me about Curtis Hall.
Well, there were about 3 places to direct plays in Shattuck. The little theater, the theater workshop, became Shattuck Theater. The stage of the home ec building, McKay, or Curtis. And I directed, the first thing I directed was on the stage of McKay, and I hated it. I did not like working in that place. I think I directed one more play at McKay and decided I would never direct another play there. So the old now, usually there were 2 plays. The Iowa State Players Play, which was sponsored by university funds, and the laboratory theater. The laboratory theater plays were always done in Shattuck Theater, so there was no problem. But for the Players Play, I decided I would use the Curtis stage. And the Curtis stage has a curtain, and in front of that curtain is 9 feet. Behind that curtain is 9 feet. And the only backstage are the 2 toilets, which are used as dressing rooms. And I think when I first directed there, one of them was an office. So everybody had to use the one toilet and dressing room on the other side of the stage.
That's pretty
but
shallow.
I enjoyed it directing. I liked the intimacy. It was a wooden theater. That's why we can't use it anymore. It was wooden, rather good acoustically, and as a matter of fact, I would rather play to 600 people in Curtis Auditorium than 400 people in Fisher Theater. It is far more difficult to get the students to project in Fisher Theater than it was in Curtis Auditorium with the wood, the wood floors and...
Because at Fisher the sound is absorbed, is that what you're telling me?
Or something, yeah, I'm not sure what it is, but it's very difficult to get 2 students to project at Fisher Theater, whereas it was not that difficult in Curtis Auditorium. And once I directed a play which I also designed at The Cat and the Canary, which had several scene changes, and I was able to close the curtain and make the scene changes very quickly backstage, even with the limited space. And I still have somewhere, I guess, models of that up in the attic. I think I've got models of that set that I designed and directed.
When you were in Curtis Hall, or in the Curtis Theater, did you do it once a year, twice a year?
Once a year.
Once a year.
Because I would direct 1 player's play and 1 lab play.
I see.
So the lab plays were almost always in Shattuck Theater, or at least the ones I directed. And the other one I direct would be at Curtis Auditorium.
Was that typically at Visha? Was the ISU play?
There was a Visha play, and for many years I directed the Visha play.
And so the one that was done in Curtis was probably in the fall, so you probably had...
No, the one that was in Curtis was the Visha time.
Was it in Visha time? Okay.
Yeah.
And how many plays a year were there? Did anybody else direct plays?
Yeah, there were, I think, 3 of us directing plays, so about 6 plays were done. 3 Iowa State players play, and 3 lab theater plays, which were done in the little theater.
Have there been any noteworthy actors, either that you've directed or your colleagues directed, that have passed through Iowa State that you can think of? I don't want to stump you on it.
There were some that had minor roles, but I can't think of anybody, and nobody that I directed necessarily.
But you had good actors. You had people you enjoyed directing. There were probably young people that came to you with not a lot of theater experience.
No, and I liked taking inexperienced people and working with them more than some of the other directors did.
As you worked at Iowa State, you had courses that changed, of course, because you came and you were just doing speech. What were some of the other courses that developed through your career?
Well, I developed the History of Theater course, and I developed another course. I forget what its name was, but it involved with teaching theater, I think, or teaching students who would teach theater. And I developed the course, and immediately it was taken away from me and given to somebody else once I developed it, because I had taught it the year I was away at the University of Illinois. I taught that, not recreational drama, but something like that. So beside the basic speech course at Illinois, I was teaching this recreational drama course. So then I came back, I developed the course, and then Underhill wanted someone else to teach it, so I was teaching history of theater and oral interpretation. I eventually, I think, took over the oral interpretation course from Frank Brant.
I know you were so busy at Iowa State. I hate to even ask this question. Did you have any opportunity to work with the actors to the community theater in Ames?
Oh, I remember doing makeup once for Guys and Dolls, but that was about it.
I'm thinking that you were probably so consumed with your own that you didn't have time.
No, I
wanted
didn't.
to
Not
ask.
while I was directing.
Mm-hmm. What would you like to see happen to theater experiences in Ames? What kinds of things, after all of your experience that you've had in theater, what do you think Ames needs? Are we pretty good with our local little theater, or what would you like to see?
Well, I think we're pretty good, considering that the community theater actors is flourishing, and I've worked with actors since I retired. Mm-hmm. And there used to be a women's theater, which was very active, but as soon as those people left Ames, that vanished. But that mm-hmm. was something that was working and doing very interesting plays. And actors has flourished, and Iowa State has done very well. Mm-hmm. But
so as you think about your career then here at Iowa State, did you have really good community support for the ISU players? In other words, I'm sure there were university people that came to the Iowa State players in the lab productions. But there were a lot of community people who provided a lot of support.
Well, I think so, but it's hard to tell in the audience.
Mm-hmm.
You either had good audiences or you didn't, depending on the quality of the play.
Mm-hmm. Did you have pretty good houses?
I think so. I had a reputation for directing rather good plays, so I never had any problems.
I guess I'm thinking that you provided a lot of entertainment for Ames. When you think about it.
Well, I think so.
Yeah, that's a lot of good theater over almost 40
Yeah.
years. How did you keep fresh? Did you go back to New York to stay fresh and get ideas?
Oh, I guess I go back frequently to see plays. I mean, once I got married and had a son, I didn't get to New York as frequently. So my son was born about 1960, and so I didn't really go back intensively to New York until I guess about, for some reason or other, 1981 strikes me as a year where I started going back to New York about twice a year and going to London about once a year. Mm-hmm. I think I went to my first trip to London in 1981.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to switch gears on you just a little bit. We'll come back to your career here at Iowa State. But I think it's important to talk about some of the other aspects of a person, including the fact that in Ames, a really highly Protestant town, you came in as a young Jewish man. And did you have a place to worship?
Well, yes. I mean, there are Jewish people in the community, and we used to go to Des Moines to worship. Mm-hmm. But eventually, an Ames Jewish congregation developed, which at first met around in people's homes. Mm-hmm. And I did not join it until about 1965, when my son needed Sunday schools or mm-hmm. something like that. Then I finally mm-hmm. decided maybe it was time to join the
congregation.
The congregation.
Mm-hmm. And they were still meeting in homes at that time.
Pretty much early on, yeah, because and then finally we moved to
was it downtown in a storefront?
We moved upstairs to a recreational area that is now Lucalan's. Mm-hmm. But it was a recreational area because there was still shovelboard things on the floor and patterns on the floor. But we built a couple of separate rooms to use for Sunday school and stuff like that. And we stayed there for a number of years.
Did you?
But before that, I think we worshipped at the Collegiate Presbyterian Church in their green room on Lynn, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it was for several years before. That's before we moved to what is now Luke Lynn's.
And when did the Jewish congregation actually have a building of their own?
Well, the the groundwork was laid in 1977. I know that because when they had the digging to build the building, there was a picture of me and my father, and that was the year my father came to Ames in 1977. So that's how I remember. That was the year that they started the building.
You obviously have a love of history, not only love of history, but of theater, but of other things as well. Can you think how that was nurtured? How did that come about?
Well, I'm basically a collector by instinct, and when I was growing up, I collected stamps, and then when my son was about 6 years old, I think we went to Canada, and that motivated me to start collecting coins, and he was interested. But when he lost interest, I kept going, and then I started collecting other things, notably Japanese Nesky, because there was a famous lady in Ames called Bess Ferguson. Do you know of Bess? Well, her son was stationed in Japan, and he asked one of his mother's elderly friends who had lived in the Orient what he should bring back for his mother, which was easy to carry and inexpensive, and the answer was Nesky. They're no longer inexpensive, but they were in the 1940s when he was stationed in Japan. So he brought back a collection for her.
Now say what Nesky is so people know.
They were toggles that would be used to keep a little nut, as it were, that could be attached to a string that would keep the purse from falling below a belt. The Japanese didn't have pockets, so they had to suspend everything from their sashes, and they had toggles above the sash, and the Chinese had these toggles too. But the Japanese toggles developed into an art form because the Japanese had laws against ostentatious display. The Chinese didn't. And these toggles did not fall under that restriction since they were functional. And they became beautiful became vehicles for subtly ostentatious display. So they are extremely beautiful little miniature carvings and easy to collect.
And speaking of carvings, you like belt buckles. What led you to collect them?
Oh, just because I like to wear belt buckles, and I started collecting them, and I wear far more than I would ever collect, and eventually I bought a cabinet, and that sat in the closet for a number of years until I decided where I would put the cabinet. And Ben Speck was kind enough to install the cabinet for me. So in my will, and of course his family is very much involved with the Ames Historical Society, so in my will I have instructions that Ben Speck take the cabinet down and give it to the Ames Historical Society with the belt buckles.
It has been a pleasure to talk to you, Dr. Drexler. Thank you for your memories about Ames and Iowa State University. You've made a big contribution. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. with a picture of, I don't know where that picture is. But what I've got